In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. Today is a day that we commemorate a particular saint that I've told you his story before, but I wanted to repeat it today so that you could think a little bit about the deeper meaning of some of the aspects of his life. And that saint that we commemorate today is St.Gerasimos of Jordan, and his icon is in the back corner there, and he has the lion's paw in his hand. Now that back, well, not that far back for the people who are in the back, but kind of up a little bit right in this corner, right before you get underneath the choir loft. Everybody's kind of looking around. It's straight there. Everybody's like, look at that stain. No. So it's right. Thanks, Brian. Brian is our senior director. So St. Gerasimos, as you see in the icon, he has the lion's paw in his hand, and his life that we understand and that we've known about, and the monastery where he lived in the just right outside the Jordan River, actually 100 yards off the Jordan River. He lived a life of solitude, of prayer. He was a monastic. He went, and many people followed him into the desert to become like he was, to pray with him. And as he was walking by the Jordan River, he sees this lion there, and the lion has like a branch going through its paw, like a big thorn branch going in its paw. And the lion comes up to him and is there, and St. Gerasimos is praying, and he reaches down, he pulls out the thorn, he cleans the wound of the lion, and he wraps the lion's foot with a cloth. The lion then follows him, and it follows him back to the monastery, and the lion starts serving St. Gerasimos as he would go down to the river and receive water. He would take a donkey, and the lion would accompany the donkey and St. Gerasimos to the Jordan River to receive water. And then one day, the lion is said to have fallen asleep, and the donkey was there kind of by the shore, and these men see this donkey, and they figure that the donkey is abandoned. So they take the donkey and they tie it to their camels, and they leave. And what happened was the lion comes back to the monastery, and there's no donkey. Now, what's the first thing you think of when you see a lion and there's no donkey? You'd think that the lion would be flossing his teeth without the donkey. So everyone assumed that this lion devoured the donkey. But what happened was St. Gerasimos and many of the other monks, too, thought that the lion ate the donkey. So what do? They start strapping the water jugs to the lion and using him to crate the water back to the monastery. And then one day, the lion is there creating water, and he sees these men again with their camels and the donkey that was missing. So the lion goes up and starts roaring at these men. The men leave everything, they run off, and the lion grabs the donkey by the mane or whatever, the cords there, and pulls the donkey along with all the camels back to the monastery. So now you can envision this lion taking this whole strand of animals with the donkey back to the monastery, and they realize that the lion was not the culprit for the missing donkey, but that the donkey was taken. And they named the lion Jordan. He actually had a name. Now you might think, in hearing this story, this is a children's story. It's a joke. But I mean, how many of you have animals at home, and you have animals and they have personalities? And some of your animals, I'll just say, don't have the greatest personalities. Even St. Paisios said that animals can be good and they can be bad. And I've run into there's nobody in here today, so we could talk about their animals. I'm looking at house blessings and trying to attach to, even though your dog took me down to the ground, it was still okay. So that was a very unique story. I'll just divert for a second. They had a very large German Shepherd who sounded like they should have been in the choir as a baritone when they barked. And they was in the garage, and they said, "Can you bless the dog?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, "It's not going to bite me, right?" And now this dog comes out of the garage. Its head is like the size of I don't even know. And it puts his paws up on my shoulders. And now I'm flicking the water at the dog. And then she pulls the dog back, and the dog's foot goes right through right where the buttons go, and it pulls me down. So now the dog thinks I'm very interested in licking this dog back or something, and it was a very unique setting. But the dog was okay. It wasn't bad, as some of the other cats and dogs who have bit me in house blessings throughout the years or pastoral visits. So there is good and there is bad. We look at people who become trainers, and I'm sure you've heard those stories of the man who lived with the bears for however many years. And I remember hearing that and saying, okay, he lives, how long is this going to last before the bear is flossing his teeth with the man? And that's actually what happened. The man was eaten by the bear, and we see that even with Siegfried and Roy when he was carried off the stage with his head in the mouth of the tiger. And there's one thing between the tamers, and there's another thing between the holy. Now, if we look back at the Old Testament, and the reason I say this is because when we look back before the fall of mankind, before sin was introduced, and even we read in the book of Genesis that animals and man were eating vegetation. That was their meal. They weren't running around. I mean, if you see the Discovery Channel now and National Geographic, it's about this animal jumping on this one and killing this one and hunting in packs and all these types. In the beginning, there was harmony. There was harmony between man and nature and between man and animals. There wasn't this scared way back and forth. And what we see in the history of the saints is that we see, especially in that back corner, we see St. Mamas, who was thrown to the lions. And he's in the lion den, and they're all saying that he's going to be eaten by these lions, and he rides a lion out. And his icon is in the back there. It's a little further back. You see him sitting on a lion, riding the lion. And you also see that he has a little deer in his hand as well in many of the icons, because he was actually nursing from a deer when he was orphaned in the wilderness. The animals were taking care of him. Then you look at St. Seraphim, who had the bear that he spoke with and talked with. And we know the stories, the beautiful story of St. Seraphim, where he's there and he's talking with somebody in the middle of the forest in his cell, and this bear walks in, and this person who was with him starts screaming. And St. Seraphim goes up and he grabs the bear and he says, "Misha," which is the name for bear in Russian. He says, "Misha, get out. You scared my guests." So then the bear just turns around and walks away and leaves. And then the bear comes back later with a large honeycomb in his mouth, walks in, drops the honeycomb, and walks out. And St. Seraphim says, "See, the bear is apologizing to you by offering you fresh honeycomb for your visit here while you're with me." So there's something to be said about the holy and about nature and about animals. And we see that St.Gerasimos had such a connection with God that was seen by the good animal, the good lion, that knew him, that saw him, and that followed him. And now we see in his monastery that they have actual birds and cages, and it's become somewhat, has a zoo quality to it in the monastery as a remembrance of St. Gerasimos. But when we see that in the end of his life, the lion would leave for a few days and come back to the monastery. The lion comes back to the monastery, and he's looking for St. Gerasimos in the monastery, and the one priest there says he's not here, and the lion didn't understand, so he takes him to his grave, and the father is crying over the grave of St. Gerasimos, realizing that they lost a great saint in the world, and the lion leans down. It says he roared, he hit his head down on the ground and died right on top of the grave of St. Gerasimos. So we see that there is a connection between nature that comes from the connection with God, the return to the relationship that Adam had with creation, before the fall of mankind. And the reason I bring this story up today, and it's great that he's commemorated today and that we actually have his icon in the church to look at and to remember, is because it's a calling for us. His life is a calling for us to return to the way we should have been, to that original way of not having this broken nature to us and this brokenness. And Christ is called the new Adam. The new Adam, and the Virgin Mary is called the new Eve. And by following them, we return to this new, or not even return back to the old, but we start this new relationship with God and this new way of being where we can be transformed into the people that we are called to be by God. And in that, there's a oneness with nature around us. We see that even St.Gerasimos Tsalikis, who is a new saint, who is just canonized a saint or commemorated as a saint this past year, when he would pray, the devil would try and stop him from praying. And he would go to the cave of St. David, and he would pray in that cave to be alone. And he said that one day he was praying in the cave and all these scorpions were coming towards him. And what he did is he took his hand in the sand, he went around in a circle all the way around him, and he drew a cross in the middle of the sand. And he sat in the middle of the sand, and the scorpion stopped at the edge of the circle and would not penetrate the circle. And he stood there all night praying until the morning, and then the scorpions dissipated because they realized they were not going to stop him from praying. But he was in the cave of St. David, and it's also said that where St.Gerasimos was, that it was also one of the cells there was a cave, and that cave was actually where the Virgin Mary, Jesus, and St. Joseph were spent an evening before they fled from Egypt. So we see that tradition is there as well, that one of those caves was one that held the Holy Family together as they traveled out to be protected from Herod. So there's a lot of stories like that of animals and saints, but on this day, we remember St. Gerasimos, this reminder for us to return to purity. It doesn't matter how good you are as a trainer for a dog or a cat or a fish or whatever it is, that will not develop a relationship with nature. The relationship that we develop with each other, with nature, with the created world around us is through a deepening of our relationship with God. And I pray that your Lenten season is filled with growth and a deepening of that relationship. Amen.